Welcome back to the retrospective on the Uncharted series. So far, we've covered the hunt for El Dorado, which turned out to be a coffin full of zombie virus, or the fungus from The Last of Us, and then the search for Shangri-La. Now it's time to talk about the third journey, the quest for a place that drew not only Sir Francis Drake, but also Thomas Edward Lawrence, aka T.E. Lawrence, aka Lawrence of Arabia. This is a search for Iram of the Pillars, and the race to find it before a British secret society with aims of control and domination can do so first. Let's talk about Uncharted 3, Drake's Deception. As always, this is a deep dive into elements of the Uncharted series. There will be spoilers. As I mentioned in the Everything You Need to Know video for the series, a core idea for Uncharted 3 was a desert adventure, and that concept originated as a technical and technological challenge to create a game focused on organic elements like sand and fire, which were difficult to animate and render in a credible manner. This of course led them to develop an evolved version of their engine, one that could handle the physics of fire, smoke, sand, and water dynamics, as well as deliver more realistic movements for the characters, the textures, and the animations. With that technological challenge came two set pieces that the game had to deliver: a cargo plane and a cruise ship, with Amy Hennig and the other writers then having the responsibility of weaving a story that incorporates those elements in some capacity. As the third entry in the series, the team sought to refine the experience, having discussions on what worked with the previous titles and what needed improvement, and from that came enhancements as complex as overhauling the enemy AI, making them more responsive and prone to good tactical choices, or enhancements as simple as having a dot reticule on the screen. Not only that, but this refinement process went beyond the single-player experience, as the multiplayer was also improved based on lessons learned. Nathan's abilities received some polish and expansion once more, this time adding the ability to pick up and fling grenades thrown at him, and making him more effective at fighting multiple opponents in close quarters, expanding the contextual action system introduced in Uncharted 2, applying it to combat, where Nathan can now use elements of the environment in his fights given the right circumstances, as well as having new ways to counter enemy attacks. The game takes inspiration from the life of T.E. Lawrence and his supposed search for Ubar, the Atlantis of the Sands, a search that he apparently mentioned he was interested in undertaking in the days leading to his fatal motorcycle accident in 1935. Uncharted 3 sees the return of Uncharted 2's Chloe, played by Claudia Black, and brings a new member to the overall Nathan sphere of treasure hunters, Charlie Cutter, voiced by Graham McTavish, the voice behind everyone's favorite sociopathic evil warlord, Lazarevich. In terms of villains, Rosalind Ayers plays Catherine Marlowe, and Man of a Million Voices Robin Atkin Downes returns yet again, this time as Talbot, Catherine's second in command in their shady secret organization. In an interview, Amy Hennig said that the villains were to be the opposite of Lazarevich, who wore his menace, his violence, his evil, outwardly, physically. Talbot and Marlowe, on the other hand, are insidious, subtle, but equally as dangerous. They'll shoot you, throw people at you, but they'll also get in your head. Uncharted 3 released in November 2011 to critical acclaim, despite the incredibly short development cycle. With that said, it's been called a rush job at times, given the marked difference there is between the first half of the game and the latter segments, but we'll get to that. There are certainly some unusual bits in the writing. I'll bring them up as we go. As with other titles in the series, Uncharted 3 Drake's Deception opens with a quote, this one from T.E. Lawrence. The quote is, "All men dream, but not equally. Those who dream by night, in the dusty recesses of their minds, wake in the day to find that it was vanity. But the dreamers of the day are dangerous men, for they may act on their dream with open eyes to make it possible. This I did." This quote is from the 7 Pillars of Wisdom, Lawrence's autobiography, specifically of his experiences during the Arab Revolt against the Ottoman Empire from 1916 to 1918, while he was a British Army colonel serving as advisor to Bedouin forces. This book was, partially, the basis for the acclaimed movie Lawrence of Arabia. The quote is spoken by Nathan Drake, as we see the camera pan across a table filled with maps and navigation tools. Then it shifts to the London skyline. Late at night, the action then takes us to the city streets, the viewpoint changing from Nate and Sully walking towards a pub to the inside of the establishment, where we see some rough types drinking, talking, playing pool, and though this is never acknowledged in the game, every single one of the patrons and staff are either bald or their heads shaved very close to it. I don't know why they're bald, but that's just the reality. The bartender leads Nate and Sully up a set of stairs where more of the bald patrons can be found, but also two men. One of them a more unique model of bald guy compared to the generic goons, who pats them down and shows zero appreciation for Nathan's humor. As the man confirms they're clean, the other man steps into the frame, wearing a black pinstripe suit, red tie, and perfectly coiffed hair. To me, the look is kind of reminiscent of Hitman's Agent 47, black suit, red tie. He offers his apologies for the treatment, but one can't be too careful. This is Talbot, and they're here to make a deal, to sell him Nathan's prized ring, the one that belonged to Sir Francis Drake, the one Elena returned to him at the end of Drake's Fortune, the first Uncharted game, after he left it in the catacombs at the foot of Sir Francis' body. The non-generic bald guy, Cutter, brings over the briefcase with cash, and then Nathan shows the goods, the ring, for Talbot to authenticate. He confirms it's indeed Sir Drake's ring, and wonders how they came about it, but Sullivan questions if it even matters. Before the deal can be struck, Nathan says the money is fake, and Sullivan grabs a stack of bills and is outraged by the attempt to bamboozle them. Nathan takes the ring back while Sully berates Talbot on how he screwed the pooch for his client, then tells Nate it's time to go. Talbot doesn't like what's going on and points out the two of them aren't really in a place to negotiate, demanding they give the ring, take the money, and walk out like gentlemen while they still can, the threat very much hanging in the air. As Nate tries to leave, Carter stops him and tells him to do as is told, which leads to a fight and the game's melee combat tutorial. Punching, kicking, grabbing, and now countering, and not just from grabs as it was in Uncharted 2. Now with the press of a button, Nate can counter enemies as they're attacking him. This is a crucial aspect of the combat this time around. Uncharted 3 introduces heavy enemies, not just the heavily armored as they were in Uncharted 2, but also, big lads. Big, hulking dudes that hit hard but attack slowly and who you need to counter to disable and get some hits in. The fighting spreads across the bar, with the aforementioned big lad grabbing Nathan and throwing him through a window down to the first floor, crashing through a table. This bar scene is also where the contextual fighting comes in. If you're close enough to a bar, Nathan will grab bottles and smash them over the heads of the enemies instead of throwing punches. Eventually, as they clear out the bar of enemies, the big lad returns and throws Nathan into the bathroom and smashes his head into one of the urinals, an overhead light, and then throws him like a ragdoll through a stall door and into the wall. But, Nate has the last laugh, after taking a few more hits in, of course, dodging a kick and then shattering the toilet's tank cover on the man's face, making him crumble, his head dunking into the disgusting toilet. Nathan stumbles out of the loo and rejoins Sully, and they head through the kitchen, trying to exit through the back. But there are more bold clones waiting for them. Eventually, though, they make it outside only to find themselves surrounded by Cutter and his goons and are promptly knocked down. A car arrives, and out comes Talbot and a stern-looking lady, who seems to know Sullivan personally, calling him by his first name, Victor, and mocking him for his undignified appearance. Still in the muck, she says. Nathan also recognizes her and says he should have known she was behind it. And when she puts away her umbrella, he delivers a nice jab and warning about melting in the rain. I always appreciate a good Wizard of Oz melting witch joke. She laughs at the comment, noting Nate's fearlessness, even noting that maybe Nathan gets off on the danger and narrowly escaping death. But the smile doesn't quite reach her eyes. Instead, they hold menace. She draws a blade from the umbrella handle and approaches the prone Nathan, using the blade to cut the string of his necklace and take the ring. She promises not to hurt them. She just wants what belongs to her, clasping the ring tight in her hand. As she leaves, Nathan stands, moving towards her, but Cutter shoots him. much to the lady's fury, which is doubled as Cutter follows up and shoots Sully as well, acting then like he just did them all a favor. Talbot calls the lady by her name, Marlowe, and urges her to get to the car. They have to leave before anyone comes looking. The ball goons also scatter, leaving Cutter alone in the alley. As the camera zooms on the dead bodies of our heroes, the scene changes to Cartagena, Colombia, 20 years prior, following a young Nathan as he cases a museum, specifically the El Pirata Sir Francis Drake exhibit, Sir Francis Drake the Pirate. Do remember that Sir Francis Drake was a privateer for the British Crown while they were at war with Spain, so for an entire group of people, he was just a pirate. In the exhibit, Nathan finds not only Sir Francis Drake's ring in a display case, but also the explorer's own astrolabe, a navigation instrument used to both tell time and positioning based on the positions of the stars and the sun. Sir Drake's own model is quite unique as it has a slot or indentation matching the exact size for the ring displayed alongside it. You know where this is going, right? Nathan looks rough, unkempt, dirty even, like he's been living on his own or even surviving on the streets, which, given that later he attempts to steal some fruit from a cart, is likely the truth of the matter. But he's already brilliant, his notebook already filled with historical research on Sir Drake. And that's when Nate notices him, a much younger Victor Sullivan, doing exactly what Nate's doing, checking out the place, sticking what looks like a blank key into the lock, and applying pressure to it. This is a form of impressioning, a lock-picking technique, where the pressure and movement applied to the blank will leave marks on it from the pins, after which the blank just needs to be filed down to the impressions to create a duplicate of the key. Nate attempts to watch Sully closer, but museum guards don't like seeing him around and toss him outside, even doing an Aladdin and calling him a street rat. After rightfully calling the guard a pendejo, Nate picks up Sully's trail and follows him to a locksmith, where he's having that key cut. Nate follows him through the streets and even clambers over walls and pipes with very much the same skills he has as an adult, at some point stretching the bounds of credulity and making it very difficult to accept that Sully didn't notice him. But the man apparently doesn't, and so he takes the key, puts it in his wallet, and joins Marlowe for a walk. When they stop near a kiosk and mention they have some time to kill, Nathan approaches and lifts the wallet, but doesn't make it very far before Sully is in his path. He tries to make small talk with the young Nathan, but the kid is not interested. Sully commends the lift of the wallet but says his technique could use some work. Nathan plays dumb, but to confirm that Nate's bumbling did stretch the bounds of credulity, as I said before, Sully confirms he knew Nathan had been tailing him all over town, saying Nate probably saw Victor as an easy mark, not knowing he was as shady as they come. Still, this conversation is very amenable. Sullivan, even back then, was a very charming guy. Sully asks for his wallet back and tells Nathan that if he doesn't comply, he'll bring in the cops, to which Nathan quite brilliantly points out that the authorities will be far more interested in why a middle-aged man is chasing a young boy down an alleyway. But this doesn't anger Sully. Instead, he laughs, impressed with the kid. Ultimately, Nathan gives him back the wallet, but this sequence has already shown you how resourceful the young Nathan Drake is. So it doesn't come as a surprise when you find out he returned the wallet but pawned the key. After all, the wallet was never important. Later in the evening, Nate breaks into the museum through the rooftop, in the complete opposite of his museum break-in in Uncharted 2, where he came in from the bottom, the sewers. He finds a display case, opens it, and takes out the ring and astrolabe, realizing immediately how the two items fit together. But before he has a chance of fully exploring what that means, Marlowe, Sully, and her men appear, and the very stern lady rips the astrolabe from his hands, while also talking down to him with very much the same disdain she spoke to his adult counterpart many years from this moment. She demands the ring, but Nate pulls a magic trick and hides it, showing two empty hands. Marlowe slaps the crap out of him, and Sully doesn't like it, calling her out for it. He's just a kid. But to Marlowe, he's not. He's dirt under her shoes. Someone not worthy of even being close to these objects, let alone touch them. Make a note of this. It's key to Marlowe and Nathan's antagonistic relationship. Marlowe is very much the classic snob noblewoman handling peasants. Nathan runs away, and discount Margaret Thatcher sends her goons after him. And they pursue him very much with a lethal intent. They're playing for keeps, some of them even shooting him. It's such an extreme response that Sully starts running interference, then shoots one of the goons before he can hurt Nathan. He takes the young man with him and they leave the museum, heading to a bar where they can relax, eat and drink, and get to know one another. It takes a little bit. Nathan is very guarded, but Sullivan is, again, a charming guy, and so little by little, with a calm demeanor and even giving him some food, he gets some answers from the young man, such as he's taking the ring back. It's an heirloom. To which, of course, Sully points out that Drake did not have any heirs, with Nathan countering that he definitely didn't, with his wife in England. This is something alluded to in Drake's fortune, in which actually has historical basis. There is a manuscript called the Anonymous Narrative, detailing the events of Sir Drake's journey around the world, in which it describes Sir Drake taking an African woman, Maria, from a Spanish ship onto his own vessel, the Golden Hind. 9 months later, a very pregnant Maria is summarily dumped on an island. This manuscript has been verified as historically accurate, but still, Maria was more or less erased from the Sir Drake narrative, to the point that famous publications of the journey omitted her presence. Probably because the whole account of the anonymous narrative makes Sir Drake look very, very bad. In fact, some believe that the account of Maria is the basis for the character of Sycorax in Shakespeare's The Tempest, who was also abandoned on an island while being pregnant. With some trust established between them, and with Sully admitting that he doesn't really know all that much about Sir Drake and the astrolabe, that very same giddy energy that Nathan has as an adult, explaining the hidden side of history, comes out, and he gives Sully a little lecture on the whole affair, including the fact that a chunk of Drake's voyage, which the accounts say took 6 months, would never have taken an experienced crew that long, that they hid something, possibly related to a mission from Queen Elizabeth, maybe even millions in treasure. Sully asks for Nate's name again, and before giving it, the young Drake wants to know what Sully wants from him. And we see the establishment of their mentor-mentee relationship. Sully ending the scene saying, "I see great things in our future." So of course, the scene quickly transitions back to them lying shot in the gutter. A glamorous lifestyle indeed. But it's not what it appears. Once he knows they're definitely alone, Cutter tells them the coast is clear, and they both stand, revealing Cutter is another treasure hunter friend of theirs. One with a flair for drama, the reason he didn't put a silencer on the gun, and why he actually hit Nathan a couple of times in that bar fight. Cutter talks to someone on a walkie, telling them Marlowe and Talbot are coming their way, and Nate reveals he once again pulled the trick on Marlowe. She's got a fake ring. This was all a ploy to get these secretive individuals out in the open, so they can follow them. The trio walks through alleys, more or less following the path Talbot took with the car. This scene also shows that Cutter suffers from claustrophobia, with him muttering to himself, it's almost over, as he's going through a tight space. This is an important detail that will come into play later on, very cleverly placed here, so it's in the back of your mind, but also tells you a lot about Cutter. Every time the other people ask what's going on, he dismisses them, likely not out of mistrust, but perhaps shame at his apparent weakness. It's not uncommon, especially with proud, quote-unquote, tough guys. When they hit the main road, they come to a white van where the fourth member of their team is waiting, a returning Chloe Fraser. It makes sense for her to be in the car. She was, after all, introduced in Uncharted 2 as one of the best getaway drivers in this very shady business. She says she followed them to a warehouse down the road. It's locked, which of course means Nathan has to clamber around the property to make it inside and open the way for them. Once inside, they realize there's a small issue. The warehouse is empty, but the car's tire treads lead to a spot facing a wall, and they notice pressure plates on the floor, 4 of them for the wheels. With each of them standing on one of the plates, two small sections slide open on the wall, light sensors for the car's headlights, which they imitate with their flashlights. The wall cracks open, revealing a passageway into underground tunnels, with Chloe suitably worried, wondering who the hell these people are. After all, this is some James Bond stuff. They tell Chloe to head back to the car, while they explore the tunnel and find out where it leads. Sully wonders who drives the car underground, with Cutter, being a smartass, telling him, "Oh, I don't know, people who don't want to be found?" The path takes them to service tunnels under London, and their quiet approach lasts only so long before they come across armed goons, all dressed in the same attire as Talbot, leading to the shooting tutorial, as the trio take out the gunman. The winding path leads to an old tube or perhaps even train station, an abandoned one that almost looks like a museum, with very old locomotives parked on the rails. According to Cutter, the station is likely about 200 years old, which is weird to say the least. Crossing this space leads into an ancient hall like a study, library, or even a vault, lined with books and historical artifacts. Nathan says it's in the Tudor style, 16th century. They head to the second floor, and from a balcony above, spy on Marlowe and Talbot as they discover the fake ring, with Marlowe berating Talbot for his hiring of Cutter, still angry about the shooting, calling it sloppy, and calling the man a loose cannon, meaning it's Talbot's responsibility for not keeping him in check. How do they figure out the ring is fake? Well, Marlowe excitedly takes the astrolabe and the fake ring, mentioning that after 400 years, they would finally reveal Sir Drake's secrets, meaning that whatever secret society they represent, they've been after this mystery for a long time. But of course, the ring doesn't fit. She of course realizes it's a fake, but Talbot is confused, telling her how he authenticated it and even held it. But as he's talking, Catherine imitates young Nate's magic trick, realizing he's pulled one over her yet again. Talbot, on the other hand, realizes it has to be Cutter. He was in on it. And proving she's a smart villain, she tells some of her men to stick around in case they were followed, while she and Talbot, plus some more goons, go in another direction, with her spitting out orders for her men to find that ring and get it to her by any means necessary. A new tutorial begins, the stealth tutorial, starting with the ability to, essentially, air assassinate enemies by dropping on them. So this discount Agent 47 below you is the next one to get added to tomorrow's obituaries, followed by one of his friends, whom you take out from behind cover, leaving the room empty and allowing the trio to peruse at their leisure, their enemies none the wiser. They're still amazed, or unnerved perhaps, about the kind of setup Marlowe and her crew have, the sheer wealth in historical artifacts and other items, including a nasty-looking spider the size of their heads, stuck in a jar, a specimen we will get very familiar with over the course of the game. Dolly tells Nate to hurry up, but Nathan cannot resist a shiny new book, and he finds one on the table, flipping through the pages, astonished at the find. It's T.E. Lawrence's journal, sent over on the day of his death. Nate surmises that they must have killed the man once they got their hands on it, but Cutter dismisses the potential conspiracy as nonsense. Sullivan, on the other hand, presses Nate to get a move on, to focus on the thing he's been after for a couple of decades, snapping Drake back into focus. The ring around his neck fits perfectly on the astrolabe, the clockwork machinery in it springing into life. He pulls out his own notebook and decodes a piece of ciphered text using the astrolabe. It spells out "long hidden," which infuriates Sully and Cutter, and they call Sir Drake as being a right bastard. But Nathan realizes what's going on. It's an anagram for Golden Hind, the name of a ship, more specifically the figurehead on the prow, which coincidentally is hanging from a wall in the room. Clambering across, he comes to it, but then more goons burst through the door and into the awaiting jaws of death itself, or Nathan's bullets, which at this point in the series, with his body count, is more or less the same. As he's shooting the goons, the figurehead drops to the floor, separating from the frame it was nailed to and revealing a map hidden within. I can only assume that Sir Drake had the figurehead framed himself, otherwise it would make absolutely no sense for anyone in this shady organization to not have found the map when they were mounting the thing. Nathan pores over the map, realizing that Drake had gone to Arabia during that missing 6-month period in his journey. Fascinated about the discovery, just as more bullets fly over his head. It takes Cutter urging him to focus for Nathan to get his head back in the game and do the one thing he's best at, removing people from the census. He calls out to them to grab the astrolabe and T. Lawrence's journal. Curiously, when the cutscene where they decipher the text ends, and Nate turns away from the table, his own journal is no longer on the table, nor is the astrolabe. The only thing on it, the only asset, is Lawrence's journal. Let's call that a continuity error. The trek back through the abandoned train station is far more hectic than the way in. Marlowe's people now coming in full force, even deploying smoke screens to hide behind. The laser sight's the only thing visible. So this is the don't let the sights fool you or you're dead tutorial. After shortening a few more Christmas lists, the path through underground rail tunnels takes them to the abandoned and extremely fictional North Atwood tube station, where they fight their way to the entrance and the warm embrace of the back of Chloe's van. Back at their hideout, or what could be Cutter's apartment for all we know, they're having a nice drink and celebrating a successful venture, raising their mugs to one another. Nate, on the other hand, is looking obsessively over the journal and the map. When Cutter asks if he'll join them, he does, but just to give them the big lecture. Drake did indeed go to Arabia, sent there by John Dee, English mathematician, astronomer, and part of the court of Elizabeth I, much like Drake and Francis Walsingham, her spy master and who we mentioned in passing on the Drake's Fortune video. Dee was also more or less the OG 007, according to Cutter. In fact, his signature looks like Bond's number, 2 circles representing his eyes, as in the Queen's eyes. Nate even suggests he might have been the one to make Drake's special astrolabe. Polly is listening, but he's getting lost, not knowing why they would send Drake all the way to Arabia on a secret mission. But that's where Lawrence's notes come into play, and Nate more or less says the same thing I said earlier, that Lawrence was interested in finding Ubar, Iram of the Pillars, the Atlantis of the Sands. Not only that, but as an archaeologist, Lawrence was obsessed with the Crusades, traveling all over, documenting Crusader sites. He hands the journal to Sully to read Lawrence's notes on Ubar. Sully is all about that immeasurable wealth. Cutter figures out the connection Nathan is implying, that Ubar is what Drake was looking for on the Queen's behalf. Not just that, Nate says, it's also what Marlowe and her people are after. Chloe, always the smart one, points out something much more curious. Drake was sent there to find it, but seems to have gone to a great length to hide every trace of the journey, even from the Queen. Nate says he doesn't know why Drake would do that, which leads Chloe to point out that the last time they went on a hunt for a lost city, it got kinda hairy. But even if Chloe is reticent about embarking on another competition with sociopaths, it's not enough to deter Nathan. This is his obsession, the quest he's been on for a couple of decades. He says it won't be that way because they have all the cards. They know where to go and what to do, while Marlowe has nothing, which is over-optimistic from Mr. Drake here. He seems to forget how his quests tend to go, or simply doesn't want to think about it. The usual pattern is Drake is confident that the opposition is far behind when they're right there. So guess what's gonna happen throughout this game? With that said, Nate does manage to convince everyone in the room to move ahead. Both Sully and Cutter offer some concerns, given that the city is supposed to be somewhere in the Rub al Khali Desert, which is fairly big, and the last thing they want to do is get lost in it, given that even the Bedouin go around it. But to that, Nate points to the Sabaean script on the edges of the map, Sabaean being from the ancient kingdom of Sheba of ancient Yemen, and says that the Crusaders were also looking for Ubar, and that of all Crusader sites Lawrence explored, only 2 have matching symbols, one in Syria and another one in France. Chloe looks excited at the prospect of a French connection, but Nate sends her and Cutter to Syria instead, leaving Solomon and him to head for France. Nathan is certain that if they find the clues left behind in those Crusader sites, they'll know exactly where the city is in that desert. We move to France, on a dirt road in the middle of a forest. Nate tells Sully it's just gonna be a short hike, with the older man retorting that every time Nate says something like that, he doesn't know if it means a little hike or 20 miles. And he's got a point. Their walks and hikes always start out looking for one thing nearby, and then the next thing and the next, and this specific journey will be more or less the same. This is Uncharted. The path is never straight, it's never smooth, so they clamber, climb, and shimmy across perilous paths, leading to a chateau that once belonged to a Crusader knight, Sir Godfrey, who returned from the Crusades in the 12th century. No further information is given about this person, but it could be Godfrey de Saint-Omer, co-founder of the Templar Order, who was A, French, and B, did return from the Crusades at some point to kinda help the new order set up shop. In any case, Nathan says only a fragment of the original fortress remains, located in the gardens of the chateau. The place is run down and not in any condition to handle Drake's reverse Midas touch. So while they do eventually break in, a whole lot of stuff gets broken, or Nathan crashes through them along the way. Solving some puzzles, they open a way through a fireplace, but the wood floor behind the secret door is so rotten that Nathan falls down into a cave. And making his way through it, he comes face to face with some of those weird, huge spiders, like the one in the jar back in London. So at this point, they're not much of a threat. And that will change. Nathan comes out of the cave through a well, and around him are a lot more of Marlowe's goons, including a few more of those bald clones from the bar. Worst of all, Talbot is there. Now, this entire thing flies in the face of Nate saying they had the advantage and that Marlowe had nothing. So it seems like they have way more than what Nate thinks, and they're one step ahead. But it's not so far-fetched to accept. This hermetic order they're part of, this shady organization, given its connection to Drake and Dee, might just be a continuation of whatever government organization they belong to. So they would have government resources, and they had Lawrence's journal for years, meaning they would already know about these sites, and it would be the easiest thing in the world for them to track the movements of the treasure hunters and make haste to intercept them. At least that's my take on it. It's not perfect, but it works for me. I think it makes sense. After calling this latest gaggle of goons, we get the grenade tutorial, which also includes the ability to return them, a nice feature that will never again be seen in the series, unfortunately. Sneaking into the fortress, they make their way down through its floors and come to a curious and chilling sight. One of Talbot's agents, not only dead, but completely desiccated, like a mummy. After another puzzle, this one bearing Sabaean script, they come to an alchemical laboratory. Nate realizes something immediately and asks Sully if this place reminds him of anything, and he says Marlowe's underground hideout. So Nate tells him this is likely John Dee's lab, possibly established as he traced the clues left behind by the Crusaders, a place he could work from, and also, likely, the reason our friendly spiders are here in the vicinity. Sully finds some notes on the inscribed stone altar, ciphered text, so Nate uses the astrolabe to read the message. The altar guards the way to the underworld, so of course they push the altar stop aside and find another puzzle room, with a really cool puzzle. Beyond it, the entrance to the Crusader's mausoleum, and in his grave, half of a stone amulet. There is Sabaean script on it, but also a hexagram that looks a lot like the Seal of Solomon. On the way out is where things get complicated. Talbot is there waiting for them, and outgunned as they are, they relinquish the medallion to them. But it's not that much of a loss given that Nathan has already added the details to his notebook. As the goon walks back to Talbot, a whirring sound echoes through the room, like millions of skittering legs. And soon after, the room is engulfed by those horrible spiders. The torches the characters hold, their only protection from their onslaught. The agent falls to the spider's bites, and that's likely how Agent Mumra died. But Talbot manages to take the stone and close the door behind him, leaving Nate and Sully locked in a room with their waning torchlight. All our protagonists are resourceful and manage to get out, running as fast as they can with a sea of spiders behind them. Not to mention dealing with even more goons who have to be getting paid so much money because they set the chateau ablaze and stay inside to fight Nathan and Sully, even as they seemingly join their enemies in being trapped in the Inferno. You know, I'd love to take a look at the Secret Society's benefits package. Must be comprehensive for them to stick around. Ancient decrepit chateau, plus fire, plus Nathan's reverse Midas touch, and you get a spectacular set piece where every step means the path behind them suddenly disappears, going up in flames or dropping altogether, or both. Still, the two make it out alive, but realize that if Talbot found them, then Cutter and Chloe are in grave danger. So they hoof it to Syria, arriving late at night. The place they're in is inspired by the citadel of Aleppo in northern Syria. It looks a lot like the real thing, but it's not a one-to-one replica, though both the fictional version and the real are tourist attractions. And even Sully asks when the place is opening for business, Nate replying that it's in a few hours, meaning they better get a move on. Unlike the chateau, the action here kicks in within moments of entering the citadel, with Marlowe's men already in position near the entrance, guarding the place. Nate infiltrates from above and through stealth or more direct means sends the guards to the big sleep, then opens the door for Sullivan. They explore the immediate surrounding area but come to a dead end. The gate's locked. They notice a well with even a bucket suspended over the hole. Nate hangs on it and Sully lowers him. This underground path, littered with soon-to-be more job openings for the Secret Society, leads to another section of the Citadel, directly facing the gate where Sullivan is, with a clear shot of the padlock holding it closed, allowing Nathan to open the way for the older treasure hunter, who returns the favor, letting them both continue and be reunited with their erstwhile companions. Chloe and Cutter are confused about their presence in Syria, with Nate and Sully saying they were here to rescue them, explaining what happened at the chateau and how Talbot and his men are likely following them too. Cutter says they're definitely here, but it seems like they've not taken direct action against them yet. Which of course, Chloe, being kind of the voice of reason in this game, says that maybe they need to keep their voices down. But before that, Nate needs to know, why haven't they answered their phones? And their reasons are just delightful. Chloe's phone is broken, and by Nate's reaction, it doesn't seem to be the first time, and likely is a recurring thing. And Cutter, well, his prepaid phone plan is out of minutes. Cutter takes Nathan aside and adds a bit more context to their enemies, stating that Dee, Walsingham, even Drake were not just part of Elizabeth's spy network, which spread all over, including Syria, but they're also part of a secret society, a Hermetic order. Hermetic in this instance referring to the practice of Hermeticism, a tradition rooted in a figure that combines the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian god Thoth. Though that pronunciation may be a bit off, but no one really knows how that name is actually pronounced from what I can gather. The tradition being a lot about esoterica, alchemy, astrology, theurgy, and basically occult stuff. The most famous Hermetic order is the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, with Aleister Crowley being perhaps the most notable member. In fact, Cutter states that the British Occult Secret Service, the School of Night, the Hellfire Club, and the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn are all connected, implying they may even be the same thing. It's funny though, that the man that easily dismissed the possible conspiracy behind T.E. Lawrence's death as nonsense is now the first one claiming all of these secret clandestine societies are connected. As for what their aim is, it's of course power, but more specifically control, through espionage, deception, and fear. Fear is the key one, and it'll come up again. Sully, as usual, is getting impatient with all the blabbing and exposition, and even Chloe is telling them to get a move on or to the point, to which Cutter shows them the symbol for as above, so below, claiming it's the key to what they're looking for. Nate says they need to get to the highest point, to which Cutter points to the stairs on the tower they're in. I love the serious section, because it adds so much depth to Charlie Cutter, sets him apart from all the goons and muscle we usually see. He might look like one, but he's just as bright and knowledgeable as Nathan, even keeping extensive notes as our protagonist does. And this makes the pairings now make more sense. Each pair of treasure hunters set out with one nerd and one grounded person to pull on the leash when they get too focused on their discoveries and theories. But Nate is by far worse than Cutter at the "ooh, look at the shiny shiny." At the top of the stairs, they notice the place is crawling with agents. Sully, who still thinks they're just here to rescue their friends, wonders what happened to the plan of get in, get them, and get out. But Cutter says they can't stop now. They're so close, and, of course, fellow obsessive nerd Nathan agrees. This, of course, leads to more stealth and inevitably another shootout up and down the tower, even across the battlements, with regular goons, big bald lads, rocket launcher goons, and even snipers. Because Marvel's people don't mess around, and as they showed in the chateau, they have no qualms about destroying heritage sites on other countries. But before the whole thing is resolved and the tourists find a truly unforgettable sight the next day, they do find the place where they must go, using a reference in Drake's map, the same as above so below symbol and a note pointing to the North Star. Directly below it is another tower, their destination. It's worth mentioning that this is one of the longest and hardest gunfights in the entire game, perhaps even the entire series, and even brings back our dear heavily armored shotgun guys, who come at you in close quarters, even followed by guys with shields and grenades. And every step of the investigation is broken up by more enemy waves. At the other tower, they find a small pedestal bearing the as above, so below symbol, and looking down, they find another symbol, the sun, and Cutter deduces that maybe it's as below, so above, the inverse concept. So Nate pans his binoculars upwards and finds a set of curious pillars, the next stop. While everyone is looking around these pillars, trying to figure out which one is the door to the catacombs, Talbot stealthily approaches and shoots Cutter with a dart. Then, as the drug begins to take effect, Cutter becomes compliant, surrendering his gun and even his journal. Talbot then leans in and whispers things in Cutter's ears, beginning with the phrase, "Don't trust Drake." Talbot slowly backs away, but the place he's in has no exits. Yet when they reach his position, he's gone, having seemingly teleported out. While a lot of Talbot's stuff can be excused away, sleight of hand, bulletproof vest later, this teleport thing is beyond ridiculous. It's the one bit that can't be explained away. If this was home turf, their base of operations, or hell, somewhere in England, you could let it go and say, it's a trapdoor, a hidden path. But the problem is that beyond the hidden door the party's looking for, this is a solid stone structure. There is nowhere for him to go without being seen, unless he's got one of Batman's like grapnel guns or whatever, or he grabbed a rope and there was a full contingent of goons on the roof pulling on it, and in that case, you'd still hear something. The worst thing is, after this level, Talbot will never pull any more magical tricks. At most, he'll just drug someone like he did with Cutter. And speaking of, to show that Cutter is under that influence, when they're running past to see where Talbot went, he visibly recoils at the sight of Nathan, becoming erratic as Drake approaches him, though Nate is able to remove the dart from his neck and show the others. Cutter seems to be getting more and more paranoid, and as Chloe so eloquently puts it, tripping balls, claiming that Sully's face is melting off. But even in this state, he's still a smart guy and provides the clues needed to find the correct pillar, opening their way to the depths. And that's where things get complicated, because drug-induced paranoia plus his claustrophobia makes Cutter snap. As Sully and Chloe go on ahead through a tunnel, Cutter turns on Nate and even tries to kill him, choking the life out of him. Nate begs him to stop, but he doesn't respond, and Sully even draws his gun on him, about to shoot him. But Chloe steps in and manages to reach him. Or perhaps the dose he had faded by then. But he lets Drake go and is suddenly horrified by what he tried to do. Nate both pats him for reassurance and pushes him away, claiming they're good, they're even. But another thing shocks Cutter to his core, that Sully was ready to kill him, and when he confronts the older man, he doesn't deny it, telling him he would have put him down like a rabid dog. And I don't really understand why Cutter is so surprised or shocked about this. Nate is, for all intents and purposes, Sully's son, and between Cutter and his kid's life, how do you think he'll choose? As they move forward, Nate goes first, followed by Chloe, and then Sully tells Cutter to go next, that he's not ready to leave his back open to him just yet, and Sully's tone is cold. So cold, in fact, that Cutter says next thing he'll be putting the gun to his head, telling him about the rabbits. This is a reference to Of Mice and Men's ending, where one of the protagonists kills the other while talking about their shared dream of having a farm, the quick death meant to save him from a lynch mob coming for him. A mercy kill, if you will. Hey, I gave you a spoilers warning, and it doesn't just apply to Uncharted. They come to an underground vault with a large terrestrial globe on a dais, and climbing to the second floor find statues with braziers on their back that, when lit, project a shape onto the globe. They realize it's the shape of countries, so they need to move the globe to match their positions, but it's a giant stone ball. Fortunately, there seem to be water controls nearby, sluice gates that should bring the water to them and then this place to life. Yet another great example of what I call ancient machinery. Ancient locales with impossibly complex technology built using materials of the time. If you think about it, the pieces of this mechanism are not technologically complex, but the concept of it, the moving parts of it, are extremely complex in terms of engineering. Charlie and Nathan head off to get the water going, and here they run into another problem. A familiar one at this point, the spiders, leading to something of a platforming puzzle with the added need to throw a torch to light a brazier in the distance. It's an arachnophobe's worst nightmare, and I don't think anyone with that kind of fear could play this game. I don't think there's an arachnophobe mode for Uncharted 3. But eventually they do get to the other side, open the sluice gates, and move the globe to the right position, at which point a section of the roof descends in a spiral motion. It's an inverted spire, or tower, with a spiral staircase leading up to the mausoleum and the second part of the amulet. Nathan uses it with the sketch of the first one, determining that the next step of their journey is Yemen. But as is usually the case, they've been followed, so they need another way out. They find a wall through which they can feel some air currents, and pushing it makes it collapse on top of an agent, which is kind of funny. But then outside they see Talbot and his men on the other side of a chasm, and the two parties train their guns on one another, and that's when Cutter starts having the shakes again, raising his gun to point at his friends. Talbot, confident now in his advantage, demands they drop their guns or Cutter will shoot them. So they comply. Still, Talbot, being a bastard, orders Cutter to shoot anyway, at which point our dear Londoner says gladly and shoots Talbot in the shoulder, revealing the entire thing had been a ruse. Only he failed to inform anyone else of his plan. So when the shooting starts and the bullets and lasers start flying, Cutter quickly runs out of ammo and complains about the rest of them dropping their weapons, with Nate replying that they could have used a wink or something. And I agree with him, the plan was great and the execution of the ruse was perfect. But he kinda screwed the pooch not letting everyone else know what was going on. Granted, there was a chance that Talbot could see through any wink, but hey, worth the risk. They climb another tower and jump from its roof to a nearby ledge, first Chloe, then Sully. As Nate lands, part of the ledge breaks off. They shouldn't have let the guy with the reverse Midas touch be anything but last, but it leaves Cutter without a place to jump to, as the distance to reach them has now become impossible. Talbot and his men corner Cutter and take his piece of the amulet from him, and then Marlowe shows up, claiming to be disappointed in Cutter that he had such potential. Cutter isn't buying it. Talbot whispers something in his superior's ear, and they bring in jerry cans of gasoline and pour them around Cutter to burn him alive on this tower while they leave. But she says something curious, claiming it's funny how things happen, almost like it was always in the cards. Faced with succumbing to the flames or jumping to his death, or at least horrible injury, Charlie chooses the latter and drops from the tower, breaking his right leg, and he's lucky he didn't break anything else. As they approach him, they notice something in his pocket, something Talbot likely put there as he retrieved the medallion. It's a card from the tarot, the tower, and the top of it is on fire in the drawing. So we can add a flair for the dramatics to Marlowe and Talbot's modus operandi. But like I said, this trick of Talbot's can be explained with sleight of hand, slipping the card in when he took the medallion, then informing Marlowe of what he'd done so they could make it look predestined. They hear more goons approach, so they host Cutter up, and Sully supports him while Nate and Chloe handle the murdering part of the sequence, fighting their way through the Citadel itself and commandeering an empty tour bus. And those tourists are really gonna have an unforgettable day, given they're already in line outside and there are dozens of bodies inside, plus destruction from explosives and so much more. It's not gonna be a good day. But Cutter does point out something interesting as they make their way outside, past a pile of bodies, that he was certain that he hit Talbot, but when we see him again, he's completely unscathed. Remember I mentioned bulletproof vest? But there is the fact that even his suit is pristine. But given that the suit is the standard uniform for these dudes, it's not far-fetched for them to just swap out the jacket, if it means catching their enemies by surprise and keep selling the Talbot is magical angle. Too bad this is the last time we see him pull any such misdirection. As they drive out, Chloe points out how bad this one was and begs Nathan to let it go. But Cutter cuts in, all puns intended, and tells Nathan that if he lets them win, he will never forgive him. Not after everything that just happened to him. Nathan reassures him, prompting Chloe to ask what the hell is going on with Nathan. What is he trying to prove? He says nothing. But we all know that's not true. Sully is on board with continuing on the next leg of the journey, seeing that Cutter and Chloe are bowing out. Nate says they need a way into Yemen without any hassle, and Sully gives him a look. There is someone they can call for that, but Nathan hates the idea. But without a better one, we welcome back Elena Fisher and allow Charlie, Cutter, and Chloe Fraser to exit stage left. Elena welcomes them to Yemen but refuses a hug from Sully, claiming they frown on that in these parts, though she does say Nate and Sullivan can hold hands if they like, and Nate grabs his hand on the way out with Sully giving him a look and pulling away. This is, in fact, true. Public displays of affection, particularly with members of the opposite sex, are considered disrespectful and could get you landed in jail. On the other hand, men holding hands is a very common display of friendship. It doesn't have the same connection to romantic feelings as it does in most other countries. Without missing a beat, she asks why they're here, and Nate casually says historical research and denies any cursed treasure or warlords or any such shenanigans. So of course, Elena calls him out for being a terrible liar. They start getting into it, arguing like only a couple can argue, and Sully interrupts them just to know where the car is, take their bags, and wait for this to resolve. Nate notices Elena is wearing a ring, and the way he points it out tells you that these two got married after Uncharted 2, but have since separated, if not divorced altogether. But he's not the only one looking at rings. Elena notices Sir Drake's ring and puts it together, that it's all about Nathan's obsession with his so-called ancestor. She even asks him why he's so obsessed about it when Nate tries to explain that he finally proved that Sir Drake came to Yemen. Elena says she's worried, but Nate assures her he can handle it, but Elena is not talking about him, and looks to Sully. Nate doesn't understand what she means, and she tells him Sully would go to the ends of the earth for him, but to please not ask him to. Nate still doesn't get it, even if it's simple for everyone else to figure it out. As I said before, for all intents and purposes, Sully is Nate's dad, and he'll do anything to help his son, especially with something so important to him as this. The hunt for the Chintamani stone was just for profit. He could bow out on that one. But this hits close to home for Nate, so Sully wouldn't let him go at it alone. Elena also gives them press passes to help them move more easily around the city, but urges them to stay in their best behavior. The police have patrols everywhere, and it's best not to arouse any suspicion. And you can see all around the environment signs for no weapons. Elena is an investigative reporter. Last time we saw her, she was pursuing Lazarevich through Warzone. So if she's in Yemen and the police are in full crackdown mode, something is going on. That something is irrelevant to the plot, but in 2011, the year of Uncharted 3's release, there were a series of protests in Yemen calling for the resignation of the president. This led to a major crackdown by the police and escalating violence, the kind of situation someone like Elena would definitely be reporting on. Elena's first plan is to get them through the market, but the path is blocked by the police, and they're not letting anyone through. The group then takes a detour, heading through a vantage point among the buildings. From there, Elena points to certain buildings that even by the time of Sir Francis would have been centuries old already. The camera pans downward and we see a familiar figure in a suit below. It's Talbot. They can see he has Cutter's notebook. Nate starts to run to catch up to him, while Elena recognizes the name Cutter, and when she starts asking questions, Nate tells Sully to explain everything to her. Nathan follows Talbot from above, climbing and parkouring while keeping him in his sights. Nate descends to street level when he notices the agent going into a building and follows him inside. And that's a bad move. Talbot had already noticed him and clocks Nathan on the side of the head, sending him sprawling. But Talbot is not done with him and throws him out a window and into an open market. Nathan lands in a heap, but reveals he's got Cutter's journal, grabbing it from Talbot just minutes ago. Unfortunately, he's not in the clear, with goons closing in on him and even more on the way, leading to a confrontation, and these guys might be the luckiest mooks in all of Uncharted. They go against Nathan Drake and only come out missing some teeth or a concussion instead of dead. By this point, Elena and Sully reach him and they all run away, with Elena taking them through a door, possibly to hide, only she inadvertently takes them exactly where they needed to go. And it also seems like Sully didn't explain a damn thing to her, so this is the bit they fill her in on Cutter and Chloe's part. And so Elena just wants them to get to the point. She wants to just hear it. What are they looking for? And Nate just turns and points to the giant well in the room. Sully, figuring danger is still about, says they'll need some hardware, and Elena sends him to a nearby rug merchant. And it's funny that as shady as he is, Sullivan doesn't pick it up, until Elena very pointedly tells him that the rugs are a front for a weapon trafficking business. His eyes light up and he goes that way, eventually returning with a pair of sawed-off shotguns. But the moment he's out of earshot, they continue bickering. Elena makes him spit it out, what this is all about, then realizes this is about Marlowe. Nathan admits it and he shows her the astrolabe and the map, and explaining how that led them here. He gives her a look and tells her to just admit it, that she enjoys this stuff as much as they do. But Elena denies it, saying she doesn't, not anymore. To which Nate's reply is, walk away then. And her retort is, oh, me walk away? That's funny. Telling you all you need to know about how their relationship ended, the cost of Nathan's obsessions. They remove the grating on top of the well and climb down to the dried cistern at the bottom, with Nate filling in the bits and pieces, like Drake being sent here on a mission for the Queen. Then, using the back of the map, which has drawings of the pillars in the area, they open the secret entrance to whatever it was that Sir Francis Drake found here. Heading inside, they continue walking and talking, piecing things together for Elena so she can catch up. Inside is a vault, the main door locked, but two others open as they approach, forcing them to complete some puzzles before they can continue. The first room has a set of gears that need to be set into place, but the symbols are kinda encoded, and you need to use a metal screen with vertical slits to decode the images. And the other room has a shadow puzzle, where a staff with very much an antique form of a flashlight must be inserted in holes around the room so that the shadows projected by the beam of light match the images on murals on the walls. With both sets of puzzles complete, the main door opens, leading to a cavernous path and eventually an ancient observatory with a complex armillary sphere in the middle sitting on a brazier. When lit, it not only projects the image of stars above, but also illuminates the map on the bottom. Realizing the same principle of as above, so below applies here, the key to finding Iram the pillars is to do as Arabs of old, navigate through the desert using the stars. Sully says he can do it if someone hands him a sextant, experience from his time in the Navy, though Nate jokes about it, figuring Sully used his time in the Navy to look for that basket act, which is a euphemism for prostitutes. You know how sailors in port will go looking for fun? Elena doesn't catch the joke, and Sully's not about to explain it. Nate asks Sully to memorize the position of the stars, but Sullivan says they should maybe just jot it down. But Nate says no, likely because, as Charlie's journal and the medallions proved it, material evidence and such can be taken from them. Our adventurers have a case of a tunnel vision at times, so as is usually the case, while they're focused on the treasure hunt breadcrumbs, they fail to notice other things. And that's where Elena comes in, pointing out the murals around them, which show anguished faces and other imagery relating to human suffering. Worst of all, that familiar skittering returns, and this time around you gotta use the torch and shotguns to keep them away. It's a very close call, while they manage to escape, returning to the main hall and closing the way behind them, keeping the swarm away. But now something has shifted in the room. There is writing visible on the murals, a message left behind by Sir Francis, a dire warning to those following in his footsteps. Elena tries to get through to Nathan yet again, pointing that even when Drake found this, he doubled back and hid the truth from his employers, from everyone. But Nate is still gonna keep going even knowing this? And when he confirms it, she asks why? He's won. He's proven he's smarter than Marlowe. He's found Iram in the pillars. Why can't that be enough? And you can hear the concern in her voice, realizing where the obsession is gonna likely take Nathan. She even begs Sully to talk to him, to dissuade him from this path before she turns away. Sully gives Nate a look, shrugs, and follows her out. And to nail down her point that continuing on this pursuit will likely get them killed, agents drop into the cistern for an underground shootout. It doesn't go well for the goons, and they end up becoming part of the decor. The trio climb back up and drop their weapons down the well, given all the no weapons signs outside. But once out the door, it's Nate's time to get darted. Much like Charlie, but unlike the cocktail given to his friend, the one Nathan comes under puts him into a feverish fugue state, where the walls and floor shift around him, and he just runs in a paranoid fit, really in a bad trip, only able to tell his friends to run before the full effect of the drug kicks in. When he comes to his senses, he's sitting at a table with Marlowe, Talbot, and an unknown man. The ring, the astrolabe, and his notes, even the map, on the table. Marlowe warns Nathan not to make a fuss, reminding him that he's not here in a perfectly legal manner, which is strange given that he arrived on a commercial flight. Those tend to involve legalities and travel papers. Unless what she means is that they falsified a visa or something, but the comment doesn't really make all that much sense. Nathan doesn't look like he's about to start anything. He looks more confused than alarmed. Marlowe reads the inscription on the ring, Sir Francis Drake's motto of greatness from small beginnings. Then turns to Nathan and with a smug look on her face, surmises that under all the swagger and the roguish charm, Nathan is still the same scared runaway from way back when in Colombia. Nate tells her to skip the mind games, that she doesn't know him at all. But she says she does. She knows full well who he is, and that Drake is definitely not his last name. But she doesn't linger on that, instead pulling out files to prove her point, by giving an overview of his early days. Mother's suicide, father giving him up for adoption, given to the St. Francis Boys' Home. Marlowe laughs, mocking the whole story for how much it sounds like a Dickens story. She then pauses, for dramatic effect. We already know they like the theatrics, but it's enough for Nick to take a look himself at the files and see the picture of Elena, and it's a recent one, from her time here in Yemen. Marlowe assures him she's safe. They have no interest in her. Unless they need to apply some pressure for Nathan. So he finally asks her what they want. And I'm sure this truly hurt Marlowe's pride more than she'd care to admit, but she tells him she needs his help to find Sully. They already know he has the coordinates, because in his highly suggestible state, while under the effects of Talbot's dart, he told them everything. She's still trying to play mind games, so she paints his confession as his loyalties not being as firm as he might think, and then shifts tactic to imply that maybe it's Sully who's not loyal, given that Nathan's been here with him for a while now, and Sully has not been here to rescue him. She then prods further, saying Sully didn't rescue him as a kid in Cartagena, he only saw something he could exploit for his own gain. Nate knows what she's trying to do, but she keeps going, telling him that Victor is only in it for Victor, that she found that out 20 years ago, and is amazed that it's taken Nathan this long to figure it out. Of course, it's nonsense. Victor turned on her in Cartagena because she was about to shoot a child, and Sully and Nathan have a much different relationship than she and he ever did. But it's Marlowe. Hell, it's that society's modus operandi to divide and conquer, to sow the seeds of mistrust. Remember Charlie Cutter's words, and even Talbot's actions in Syria. What they want is to control their enemies through espionage, deception, and fear. This is their playbook, and Marlowe is following it to a T. But Nathan doesn't take the bait. Talbot then approaches Marlowe and whispers something, which she reports as them having found Sully, with Talbot beginning to walk away, and the other figure, the other man, standing behind Nathan, hands on his shoulders. Marlowe, smug, confident, points out that with this, they have now taken Nathan from the board, and arrogance is Marlowe's greatest weakness. Much like it blinded her from the potential trickery in London, here it leaves her unguarded when Nathan flips the table and pushes past them in pursuit of Talbot, leading to a chase sequence that starts out fun but gets progressively more obnoxious as it just doesn't seem to end. And even if you do manage to get close to Talbot, despite him being just a little bit faster than you can't catch him until the game decides it's time for you to catch him. These running sequences work when Nathan is running away from things, but not as he's the one chasing them. When Nate finally catches up to Talbot, they scuffle and Drake gets the upper hand. But in another example of the members of this society having magical, teleporting powers, or just convenient plot hole deus ex machina, the other individual who had been there with Marlowe, who put his hands on Nathan's shoulders, suddenly appears behind Nathan and smashes him with a 2x4, knocking him out. And this leads us to the most pointless sequence in the entire game. It's the anime filler of the Uncharted series, a detour without any narrative purpose, there just to fulfill the mandate to have a set piece with a cruise ship. I usually give props to Naughty Dog for the way they weave story so that the set pieces make sense, but this one doesn't. And for me, this is where the issues in Uncharted 3's plot and pacing really begin. Nathan wakes up on the hold of a cargo ship, surrounded by pirates and that other gentleman, whose name is Ramses, the leader of this crew. He plays good cop and bad cop. Good cop when he says he saved Nate's life, going against Marlowe's wishes to get rid of him. But he wants to know where Ubar is, to which Nate replies he really doesn't know. So he switches to bad cop and says he'll have to extract the information from Sully, whom they also have in their clutches. There is one aspect of this interaction that I really like. Ramses' outrage when Nathan doesn't trust anything he says, claiming he's a good businessman when Nate just points out he's a pirate. Nate escapes and fights his way through a ship graveyard, eventually boarding the cruise ship that acts as the pirate's main vessel. And in a move that continues to baffle everyone that's ever played this game, Ramses even sets up a dummy in the hold that looks like Victor. It's a straw figure, literally. Why would you do that? It serves no purpose beyond a aha, gotcha moment. It's not even theatrical in the way Marlowe and Talbot operate. It's childish. I could perhaps see it as Ramses attempting to imitate the way they work, to play at being part of their society when clearly he's a mook, another grunt. But someone as clever as Nathan should have realized within seconds that Marlowe would never entrust someone as precious to her aims as Sullivan to these pirates. They're pirates. Not exactly top 10 on the most trustworthy employees list. She's arrogant, but she's not stupid. Not to mention that beyond the set piece, when the ship turns over, blocks and begins to sink, and the escape from it, there is nothing in this entire section that moves the plot forward. No new mysteries, no new insights, nothing. It's utterly pointless. Is it fun? 50-50. It goes on a bit too long. Some of the bigger areas are a pain to traverse and have too many enemies, but it's quite the spectacle, and Ramses has a night's end where, knowing it's all gone to hell and that he's dying from a Nathan-inflicted gunshot, blows a hole in the only thing keeping the flood at bay, letting the waters wash him away and hoping they do the same for Nathan. They don't. Nate drifts to shore, coincidentally arriving to the same city he left, only blocks away from Elena's apartment, where we can hear her on the phone, asking for information, telling people to call her when the situation changes. Then he stumbles inside, exhausted and injured, struggling to walk. She drops her phone, runs to him and embraces him, relief washing over her face, with Nate joking about the PDA being frowned upon, making Elena chuckle despite the worry, and despite telling him to shut up. When she asks if he's okay, he wants to know about Sully instead, and she confirms two things: good news and bad news. Good is he's still kicking. Bad news is Marlowe's got him, on a convoy heading to the desert. Nathan, looking almost delirious, his eyes unfocused, says they have to go after him, but he can't even take a steady step forward. Elena stops him to both support him, but also explain that it's not that simple. She helps him to the sofa and tells him they have more than 2 days head start on this, but they're loading a cargo plane with supplies. So what they need to do is break into the landing strip and board that plane, to use their own means to catch up. Nate jokingly points out that it means parachuting, something they've done before, just not well. A nice callback to their rough landing to the colony in Drake's Fortune. Nate says he only needs a glass of water and then they can go, but Elena stops him, telling him her contact at the airport said the plane is leaving at dawn, giving them some time to rest and prepare, and Nate definitely needs to rest. Nathan doesn't want to, but she convinces him, telling him that the contact will call if anything changes, which is what we heard her say on the phone when Nathan arrived. Laying on the sofa, head on her thigh, Nate, still groggy, asks if she was gonna go do this all on her own, and she says yes, it's Sully, so she would definitely do it. He says he likes the way she thinks, to which she replies, I know. Nate shakes his head, then tries to explain what he actually means, but the words fail him, and she once again replies that she knows what he means. And you don't need to read that much between the lines to know that what he means is that he loves her for what she was willing to do. Her loyalty and determination have always been traits that Nathan has admired since they first met. He takes her hand in his fingers tracing the ring on hers, and he says, I'm sorry, before falling asleep, to which Elena gives the third I know in response. And in this moment of vulnerability, physical and otherwise, you can feel the regret and remorse in Nathan's words. And you gotta give it to Nolan North and Emily Rose for their portrayals. It's great stuff. As the camera retreats, it focuses on Elena's expression. Wistful, sad even, likely thinking of their relationship and all that led to them being in this position. Later that night, they arrive to what looks like a military installation, not the airport, as Elena's mention of a contact might have suggested. Nate says they'll need to be quiet, that if they get caught, they'll get killed. But that's not actually true, given that it's 99% certain you'll get caught and that you will inevitably end in a gunfight. You can even start shooting the moment enemies show up, and there will be zero consequences. So it's a bit of a, what do they call it, ludonarrative dissonance? After sneaking through and eventually putting more agents on Death's to-do list, they come to a gate leading to the runway. Nathan notices a jeep nearby and tells Elena he'll climb the gate and then help her over it. But instead he vaults to the other side, and when Elena protests, he tells her this is a 1 in a million shot, and he already almost lost her before and he can't do that again. Calling back to Uncharted 2, when useless treasure hunter and all-around bastard Harry Flynn blew up a grenade near Elena, leaving her severely injured. He tells her to grab the jeep and get out. And I love this scene as a continuation of their conversation in the apartment. It's the turning point for Nathan. His priorities have been challenged throughout the game, and he's focused on his obsession, his decades-long quest, despite the danger and bodily harm, not just on him, but others. But losing Sully, losing Elena, it's finally a step too far. He's not gonna let her put herself in danger for him, not this time. And his quest now is to find Sullivan to rescue him, nothing else. But Elena doesn't just leave like this. She's gotta have her final badass moment in the game. There's a quota we gotta meet and respect. Nate continues on foot, fighting his way through the airport, but doesn't quite manage to reach the plane in time. It's speeding up ahead of him. So Elena shows up with a jeep and helps him reach the landing gear, and he tucks in nicely into that compartment as the plane flies away. And here we come to the second of the major set pieces that Naughty Dog used as a starting point for Uncharted 3, the cargo plane. Nate makes his way through the belly of the aircraft, crawling through one internal compartment and vent to another, peering inside the aircraft to see what's going on. Problem is, Nathan is not really as subtle as he thinks he is, so he's found out, dragged out, and the fight begins. The big land even opening the cargo bay doors to throw him out, and as he's being cornered, he decides to pull open a parachute on a large crate, the thing opening outside the craft and pulling every container, vehicle, and goon for the inevitable and catastrophic Rube Goldberg crash. With Nathan knocked off the plane and forced to grab onto one of those supply boxes that were going to airdrop, pulling the cord on its parachute and riding it all the way down to the middle of nowhere in the Rub al Khali Desert. You know it's a dangerous place when its name translates to the empty quarter. Though there have been studies and satellite imagery that suggest that there may have been ancient settlements in the region, signs of human activity. This set piece is perfect. It's over the top as all hell, but it doesn't outstay its welcome and leads immediately to the next story beat. And have I mentioned it's incredibly over the top? Unfortunately, that next story beat is one of the most disappointing in the game. Not just for the players, but for the Uncharted developers themselves, with Amy Hennig even regretting the way they made it. Nathan lands in the desert and begins his trek, crossing the sands over what seems like days. The ardent sun bearing on him, the heat and thirst having an effect on him. He even deals with mirages and straight-up audio-visual hallucinations of Sully and of Marlowe quoting the very poem that inspired this sequence. That poem is The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot, which has a line the sequence kind of builds around, to showcase the helplessness and despair of marching through the desert. I will show you fear in a handful of dust, and directly uses another line in a material way. Come in under the shadow of this red rock. And Nathan does just that. He keeps walking and eventually collapses from exhaustion and wakes up the next day to continue his trek, now a few days without a drop of water. Let me make this abundantly clear. Nathan should be dead. Technically speaking, most agree that it takes 3 days without water in the desert to die from dehydration, and Nathan reaches the abandoned town within that time frame. But that doesn't factor in the physical exertion of walking that distance, nor the fact that the Rub al Khali's temperatures often reach 50 degrees Celsius, which is about 122 Fahrenheit for you Americans out there. It's scorching, and the night plummets to the point that frost has been observed. Worse still is that Nathan doesn't even find respite in this town. First he climbs over a wall, then he falls through the floor of that edifice and finds a puddle. While the puddle, he says, is undrinkable. Too much sand in it, apparently. And straight after this, another action sequence begins, full of fighting, shooting, and eventually horse riding. This entire sequence is one of Amy Hennig's regrets, and she mentioned this to Nolan North while he played Uncharted 3 on his YouTube channel, with Nolan telling her that there should have been a moment where he found something to drink. The intent was to showcase the extreme conditions, the isolation, the despair, to let players know that Nathan was in a desperate situation without seemingly any hope in sight. But the fact that he climbs and moves like normal, not to mention goes straight into another fight, completely deflates whatever emotional gravity they were going for. So she said that if she could redo it, she would add a moment where Nathan does find something to drink, as a moment of victory for the player and for Nathan, to convey that it's that drink of water that allows Nathan to continue on his journey and fight as he needs. My issue with this sequence is not just the above, the lack of impact, given that the narrative dehydration doesn't match the game's mechanics, but also that the trek through the desert should have been a cutscene and not a 5-minute long walking sequence, where you don't do anything but move forward, and seems to me like it was put there in that fashion just to showcase the sand simulation technology, where the dunes under your feet shift as real sand would. But it's not really all that engaging, and to me flies in the face of one of the key tenets the Uncharted team always held to when developing. If it's not exceptional, it's getting cut. This is definitely not exceptional. It's frankly boring. But as I said, Nathan proceeds into the town and finds Marlowe's people in their brand new summer collection desert attire, and a massive gunfight begins, where Nathan adds even more people to gun violence statistics. Eventually though, because of the sheer number and firepower difference, things start to look grim for Nathan Drake, and then his rescue comes in the form of warriors from a Bedouin clan. They don't know him, but the enemy of my enemy and all that, so they help him onto a horse and even hand him an RPG to blow up the city's gate, allowing them to escape and reach the clan's encampment, where Nathan finally gets a proper drink and is allowed to rest. The man who rescued him, voiced and motion capped by British actor TJ Ramini, and who's wearing a very stylish blue garb, tells Nate he doesn't belong here. None of these outsiders do. Nate asks why they spared him and didn't just kill him along with Marlowe's goons, to which the man says it would have been rude to do so. He was in distress, and even enemies must be fed and sheltered, and this is not just a nice sentiment, it's in the Quran. Prisoners of war have the right to be fed, sheltered, and clothed. He does wonder if Nathan is his enemy, and after they introduce themselves, his name being Salim, the sheikh of this Bedouin tribe, Nathan tells him that he needs a horse, even if he doesn't have anything to offer in return. Salim wonders if he's planning on going after the convoy alone. They've been tracking them for a few days now. Salim wants to know why they're all here. Why are they crossing the Rub al-Khali? And Nate tells him they're looking for Ubar. And just by saying Iram of the Pillars, Salim conveys to both Nathan and the player that he knows what that is, and that we don't need another round of exposition. But we're gonna get some exposition anyway. Nate tells him they have his friend, the only one who knows how to get to the city, and that once they do, he'll be expendable. They'll kill him. But Salim, with a grave face, tells Nathan that if they do find Iram in the Pillars, then everyone is going to die. And here we come to that exposition bit. He explains that 3,000 years before, King Solomon controlled the jinn, beings made of smokeless fire, until they rebelled, at which point he imprisoned them in a brass vessel and cast it into the depths of Iram in the Pillars, which cursed Ubar, turning it into a place of evil from the tormented jinn spirits. And though he doesn't say it, it's implied that this is what led to the city's downfall. Salim is adamant that the English must not reach the city, and Nathan senses the gravity in his words and realizes they don't have much time left. Salim tells him they ride at dawn, and this leads to another big action sequence, a modified version of the truck chase in the Himalayas from Uncharted 2, only this time Nathan can jump from the burning trucks to his horse. They fight their way through the convoy, severely depleting Marlowe's manpower resource and managing to get Sullivan out. Both Nathan and his mentor relieved to see the other alive. Sully says he was certain they had killed Nathan. Salim tells them that they have to continue to stop them from reaching the city. And once again, that shift in priorities is in Nathan, and he starts to tell Sully that he's not sure they should do it. But Sullivan interrupts him and tells him that after spending some days with Marlowe and her crazy crew, he's certain that what they're after in the city is not treasure, and that Salim is right. They have to stop them. Ahead of them is a terrible sandstorm, but Salim tells them that's the way they have to go. But with the low visibility in the storm, they lose track of one another. So it's only Sullivan and Nathan that get to the outskirts of Iram, where the convoy has set up shop, leading to the final stealth plus action sequence, as you take out another contingent of Marlowe's goons. Not as numerous as Lazarevich's army of clones, but just as dangerous. Before officially reaching the city, they have to go through the main gates, and these are a mechanical marvel. Stuff we don't even see in our time, and which blow the entrance to Shambhala out of the water in sheer spectacle. a set of mechanisms that make two guardian statues turn in place, grab the giant doors, and pull them apart. I'd love to visit somewhere in the modern world where someone has splurged enough money to make that a reality, just because. The City of Brass, another name for Iram, is breathtaking. Naughty Dog really knocked it out of the park with the design. It's a gleaming jewel of the desert, and the name City of Brass is accurate as the material is used liberally throughout the entirety of Ubar, on every building, pillar, every corner. In some cases, even the entire floor is brass. Not only that, but clockwork mechanisms seem to be very common here, as the statues move and salute them. Not to mention the elevators and sand-based water wheels we'll come across later on. This is not only a gleaming city, but a technological marvel. They come to a small fountain and Nate drinks some water, while Sully just uses it to freshen up. He doesn't actually ingest any of it. They then see an eclipse is starting, and that's when a gunshot rings. A growing bloodstain forming on Sully's shirt, with him looking confused before falling dead in Nathan's arms, and revealing Talbot and Marlowe standing behind, a rifle in the agent's hands, and a smug smile on their faces. Nate tries to talk to Sully, but it's too late. He's gone. Still trying to come to terms with this shocking, heartbreaking development, Nathan witnesses Marlowe and Talbot get on an elevator and head down into another level of the city. And, filled with rage, he chases after them. But when the elevator comes back to his level, there are enemies coming for him. These are more of Marlowe's goons, but when they die, they light on fire. Smokeless fire, identifying them as Jinn, and telling you the audience that Nate is once again tripping some serious balls. These enemies are by far the worst of the supernatural but not really enemies at the end of every Uncharted. Not only do you have to kill them twice, but they teleport around and essentially have grenade-like fireballs at their disposal at all times. Encounters with them are obnoxious, to say the least. The sequence that follows is part shootout and part that trippy chase through the marketplace in Yemen after being stunned by Talbot's dart, only much worse, in every sense, as it includes a section in Cartagena, using the same map from early in the game, now covered in those horrible spiders. Nathan running with all his might to escape them, only for the scene to shift to that rooftop where Sully saved him. Only now Sully has his gun trained on Nathan. And he doesn't even look like his younger self, but the current, older Sully, while Nate does look like a kid again. When this Sully reaches him, he shoots Nathan, but this doesn't snap him back to reality, but more of this dreamscape and more Jinn down the path. It gets on and on and on. He finally arrives at a pool and sees Sullivan walking through a threshold that turns into a solid wall. Then, with the aid of his own reflection in the water, he turns mechanisms to, hopefully, open the same path for him. But instead, something shiny appears in the pool, and when he tries to grab it, to pull it out, his own reflection attempts to kill him. And this is finally the end of the hallucination. Now alone, he picks himself up and pushes further into the city, passing by more enemies and turning them into remains that will greatly interest and confuse future archaeologists. He then hears Sully call out to him, but Nate is now uncertain of what is real, and even raises his gun to Sullivan, wondering if it's actually real or not. Sully, carefully, calmly, approaches him, takes the gun, and flicks him in the forehead, asking, "Is that real enough for you?" He then puts Nate's gun back in the holster and very carefully tells him, "Don't ever point a gun at me again," with a stern tone of a father who just caught you misbehaving. Nathan tries to explain that she saw them shoot him right after they saw the eclipse, but Sully doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, only that after he took a sip from the fountain, he started acting erratically. Sully tells him it's the water. That's what brought the city down. It's contaminated with a hallucinogenic agent that made the population go insane, and that it's most likely what Marlowe is after. They're all about controlling through fear, and this will do it for sure. Nathan remembers Salim's words and realizes it's not the water, it's what's in the water. The brass vessel that Solomon chucked in there, supposedly holding the Jinn. They discuss that this is what Dee and Elizabeth sent Drake here to find. It's not treasure, it's power. And Sir Drake didn't want them to have that kind of power. so he lied to the queen and hid the truth of his voyage. Sully shrugs and says, "Who are we to argue with Sir Francis?" So they head to where the bad guys are, to end this once and for all. And it's not just the present situation, it's also about ending their long history with Marlowe and putting Nathan's obsessions to rest for good. After a few more exercises in aggressively violent employee restructuring, they come across a crate full of scuba gear, including a flare gun that Sully immediately takes, though this gun seems to fire mini rockets with a nice explosive yield. The real-life counterpart is a Heckler & Koch P11 underwater pistol, which fires special darts for, firing underwater. But these darts are not even remotely explosive. So Naughty Dog took a little bit of creative license with this gun. They get to the central pool at the end of the path, where Marlowe has set up a winch to drag the vessel up. They split up, each going a separate way on the circular path surrounding the pool, aiming to catch their enemies unawares. But Talbot discovers Nathan, and just as he's about to shoot him, Sully grabs his hand and pulls him up, diverting the shot, and gets his butt whooped as thanks and tossed into the water. Nathan, knowing what will happen if Sully swallows even a drop of the liquid, jumps into the water to follow him, and as they reunite, they see the vessel of brass, the object even having the seal of Solomon on its lid. Nathan takes the flare gun and fires it, not only destroying the winch and casting the vessel back to the depths, but also hitting the surrounding area, destabilizing it, and much like what happened in Shambhala, starting a Metroid-style self-destruct sequence. Marlowe is distraught, but as everything begins to shake, Talbot grabs her and pulls her away, his priority being her safety. So far in the game, he's been the obedient right-hand man, but this entire sequence does show how much he cares about her, how much her well-being matters to him, and this should have been further explored in the game. Not to mention, we gotta talk about the Vessel of Brass. In every Uncharted, the quest has been about a thing, an object, a treasure, a hoard. Here, it's a place, and it's very vague why everybody would be interested in this place, and the game's narrative fails to convey any motivation for actually coming to the realm of the Pillars. It's especially egregious because the only thing you know is this legend about Solomon and the Jinn. And sure, Dee, Elizabeth, Walsingham, Drake, Marlowe, and Talbot could have learned this legend. Makes sense, cool. But there is very little foundation to make the logic leap from, oh, vessel of brass holding Jinn, to vessel of brass holding hallucinogenic compound that we can use to control the world. Granted, you don't find about El Dorado's zombie virus until the very end. Cool. You spent 90% of this game not knowing why anyone would go to a realm of the Pillars other than bragging rights. And that is, well, truly disappointing, because there's no build-up to the Vessel of Brass. You just get there, blow it up, good, we're done. It's a step down, especially considering the breadcrumbs you have in Uncharted 2 relating to the resin and the Chintamani stone. You have a thread that connects the dots. That is missing from Uncharted 3's narrative. In any case, Nate and Sully make it out of the water and run for their lives, along the way taking out some goons with very stunted survival and self-preservation instincts. The city is falling apart around them, falling into the sand. They reach a hall and come face to face with Marlowe and Talbot. But before any conflict erupts, the floor collapses under Nathan and Marlowe, the two of them tumbling down into the sands below. And this is not exactly quicksand. It's more of a sinkhole gradually pulling the sand down. Nathan manages to get to the other side where Sully is waiting for him. But Marlowe is not that lucky, having landed more or less in the center of it, right where the sand is being pulled to. Talbot desperately tries to reach for Marlowe, but he's too far away. As Sully reaches down for Nate to get him back up top, Marlowe calls out to Nathan, using both his name and surname, the one she says before wasn't actually his name, and pulls out Sir Drake's ring, asking if Nathan is worthy of the name. Can he be great in this moment and help her? He says he has nothing to prove and doesn't move. Talbot shouts that he can't just let her die, but Sully responds like hell he can't, and to be honest, I'm kinda with Sully on this one. It sounds bad, but the audacity to demand mercy after all they've done? It's too much. But Nathan proves to be the better man and does try to help her, swinging his bandolier towards her to grab and hold to pull her out, but she's sunk too far down and can't keep a proper grip on it. And so Marlowe sinks into the sands, the ring following right after her, in perhaps the worst way to go in the series so far. Talbot is distraught, but Nate and Sully hurry up and run for their lives, the city literally falling apart behind them. And I love that Sully just screams at Nate, asking how he managed to do this much damage with 3 bullets. And I gotta say, I'm with him. This is a new level of reverse Midas touch for Nathan. It gets so bad they're doing platforming across broken platforms, falling down what looks like a waterfall of sand. And this is where Talbot comes back into play, filled with righteous rage to avenge Marlowe. And the final boss starts. And this might be the best one in the series. Just a straight-up brawl against an opponent with a knife, using counters and breaking grabs, all while you have the spectacle of the collapsing Iram in the background. Talbot gets the upper hand, slamming Nathan down on the floor and bringing his knife down. Nathan grabbing his arm, resisting. Just as it looks like Talbot is going to win, Sully shoots him and mocks him for bringing a knife to a gunfight. All because it's never so simple. A tremor hits their collapsing platform and Sully drops the gun. Nate grabs it, but before he can shoot Talbot, the floor gives way under him, forcing him to climb back up while holding the gun, trying to reach them before Sully's own fight with Talbot goes pear-shaped. Talbot knocks Sully to the ground and raises a rock over his head, aiming to squash Sully's like a pumpkin, but some well-timed shots by Nathan finally do the magician in, sending him tumbling to the sounds below and joining his employer. Sully helps Nathan climb up and they both escape the city, where Salim is waiting with horses, as the realm of the pillars falls forever into the sands of time. Nate quips, "So much for immeasurable wealth, huh?" And to that, much like with the end of Drake's fortune, Sully shows that he managed to grab some gold coins on the way. Nate says it's not much, but Sullivan says it's more than enough. As they leave the desert, we move to the Yemeni airport, with Nate and Sully walking towards the plane waiting for them. Sully stops and tells Nathan to hold up, and he's got something to say. He goes on to tell him about his life. And you know, Richard McGonagall can convey this much better than I could, so just listen.
Look, I had a lousy father, lousy childhood. I hit 40, I figured I was never gonna have a son of my own. Hell, I never wanted one. What the hell do I know about raising a kid? Then you came barreling into my life.
Look, you don't have to.
No, listen, I do. I have made a lot of mistakes, kid. A lot. And, well, I am not a perfect man.
Sully pulls out a ring and Nate immediately jokes, asking if Sully is about to propose, because he loves him, but you know, not that way. But this time, Sully is not here for jokes. He flatly tells him to stop being a wise ass for just a second. Nate wonders how long Victor has carried that ring around, and Sully's response is perfect. Too long, and hands him the ring. The implication very clear. Go fix that relationship. That's what should matter the most to you. And he closes off this serious talk in a way by telling him that Sir Francis Drake's motto is wrong. You don't choose how you come in the world. You don't choose your beginning, be they small or great. Real greatness is what you do with the cards you've been dealt. And he nods to Elena, who's just joined them on the runway. Nate turns to Elena and asks if she's going somewhere. And she says maybe, nonchalantly, before saying she's sorry Nathan lost his ring. To which he gives such a smooth answer. I swapped it for something better, putting his hand on hers, showing he's wearing their ring. This makes Elena light up, understanding all the subtext, where Nathan would probably need it spelled out. And they hug, reuniting. They rejoin Sully and he tells them to follow. They're not going on the safe, boring commercial flight. No, Sully has a new hydroplane and that's their ticket home. He admits it's not as nice as the one Nathan and Elena wrecked in the first Uncharted 4 years prior, but it'll do. And so, Uncharted 3, Drake's Deception ends. This title is about deception and it's multifaceted. There's Sir Drake's literal deception, the deception behind the conspiracies, the deception behind Nathan's origins and his name, and perhaps most of all, Nate's self-deception, how he lies to himself regarding his motivations and priorities, not ready to face what his unhealthy pursuits had and could cost him. But that's all in the past now. We end with him walking to a new life, having grown as people, figuring out their priorities and leaving unhealthy obsessions behind. Join me next time as we see the writers disregard all of this for the sake of new drama in Uncharted 4: A Thief's End.